This is Sam Long.
I'm Ron Peters.
And I'm John Newton.
Welcome to the After Class Podcast.
Because the best conversations happen
After class.
Thanks for joining us. Another episode of the After Class Podcast. We're glad to have you along. Today, this podcast is going to be released on Memorial Day.
Yep.
For those listening on the day of the release, which probably most of you don't, but Here we are. And it's the official, the unofficial beginning of summer. Right?
Unofficial,
right? Because
we haven't hit the
you're
summer
in your solstice business, right?
You and your
But for the rest of us. So we thought as we started, we talk about different summer plans we got going on for our families, for ourselves. This weekend, not this weekend, but Memorial Weekend, when this is coming out, I'll be in Round Lake. I'm taking a contingent of some GLCC affiliated people. They have a family camp there, so we're going to lead worship Sunday morning, and I'm preaching. So getting the word out about GLCC in the Ohio area. My sister's been bugging me to come do this for years, and finally she convinced Travis Fox, one of our regional recruiters, to do it. So
good for you. Way to go out there and promote the college.
And Jesus, Ron. Gosh.
You're the one who said the college. I was following up on what you
preaching.
said.
It doesn't matter. So what else you guys got going on this summer?
I got a lot of things on the calendar already. My summer's kind of filling up. Like the second week of June, we've got to go up. Suzanne's family has a camp up in the UP. We got to go up there and do a bunch of repairs on it because the place just needs repair. So I have like a week up there. The end of June, I'm doing a camping trip with my daughter, son-in-law, grandkids. We're doing a weekend camping trip.
Nice.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Maybe.
It should be fun. We're going to a camp place, state campground that I've been to before. It's pretty nice. Then right when we get back from that, I'm going on a short trip with a bunch of my guy friends, which we've gotten the habit of doing every year. This will be like the fourth year we've done it. July, sometime we'll go up to camp again for like a 1-week trip. So it's like I've already got a bunch of things planned out there, and I don't want to fill up my whole summer. I kind of want a little bit of just like downtime. So I don't want to add too many more things in there.
I feel that. I've filled up my summers in recent history.
Last summer was very intense for you.
Yeah, it was too much. And I definitely avoided that this year.
Good call. Good call.
Well, along similar lines with Sam, next weekend I'm going to Rock Lake Camp, and there's a preacher's weekend, kind of a
During
Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and so I'll be doing some teaching there about Jesus.
Cool.
Well, good
not just about Great Lakes.
So glad to hear that.
And I'm really looking forward to that. There's a lot of guys there who just were students who studied under many of us here at the college and formed mentoring relationships that have lasted over the years, and now they're doing incredible things in ministry. So it's an honor to be able to kind of speak to them now as peers, like just to talk about ministry and the Scripture together. And so it's a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to that. We don't have much in the way of travels planned. I guess Memorial Day we will go to the Dog Bowl in Frankenmuth. That's regular.
Right,
That's a staple for my family. But other than that, I can't plan much because at some point at the end of the summer, beginning of fall, we're not sure when, our daughter Sierra will be having a heart surgery to get a valve repaired or replaced.
Oh, yeah.
And that's going to be a really big deal. She's the one who just gave birth to our grandson, Shepherd. And we're just not sure when that's going to be. And we know it's going to be a big deal for the family. And we're going to be doing some serious grandma-grandpa duty during that time period and taking the burden off of Christian and Sierra so they can do business. And she has to recover. And so it's kind of like our summer's on hold until like we don't want to leave and go anywhere.
Right, yeah.
Until we know, so her meeting's, like the 1st of June with the surgeon and who will set the date. And once we have that date, we can think of it. He might say, yeah, this is pretty bad. Let's do it in 2 weeks. Right. Or he might say, yeah, let's wait a month. Or, so our summer is kind of hijacked by the not knowing.
Yep.
But I do know that I'm going to spend some time in the swimming pool. It's already opened and clear. It's just frigid.
Yeah, it's brisk.
So it's nice that spring has kind of been long. Like, we didn't skip right from like winter to summer.
So it sometimes happens.
You kind of enjoy in this kind of in-between weather.
Yeah.
But it's terrible for opening your pool. You have to open it because it's warm enough where if you don't, algae will start growing and you'll open it up to a swamp and then have to wage chemical warfare for 2 weeks. But it's frustrating to be clear and not to be able to go in it. So
you can go in. It's just going to suck.
Yeah,
What's-
Caleb actually already went
That
in
sounds
it
right.
Oh,
last
wow.
week or this past weekend, and he was in it for like a half hour. I guess he's been doing the cold shower thing.
Right. Which,
Oh,
if you
yeah.
get used to it, it's okay.
So yeah, he's already.
What's
built
the
up
actual
some
water temperature?
immunity.
Like?
When he went in, it was 64.
That's pretty cold.
But a couple of days ago, it was up to 68. By the end of this week, it'll probably be in the low 70s. I want to throw the solar cover on to kind of expedite things, except, the maples are beginning to drop their swirly little
Oh,
helicopter seeds,
Yep.
and that just makes a mess on top of the cover. So I just have to leave it until they all drop, and then I can finally put it on there and get this show on the road.
Huh.
Anyway, that's way too much, but
Yeah, it is.
summer.
Well, for those of us who spend a lot of time up in the UP and like swim in Lake Superior every year, we're like, that's doable. I mean, if you've swam in Lake Superior, it is bitterly cold in the midst of summer, and your body gets used to it. So,
Or it doesn't.
When I first get in, it's pretty dang chilly, but I do acclimate, after a short period of time.
And one more thing I'm looking forward to is the brocation with my 3 son-in-laws. Like Caleb, the oldest son-in-law, is planning a little getaway for me
cool.
and my 3 son-in-laws. So we're calling it a brocation. I don't know when we're going to
That's
do
a
it,
great
but I think that'll probably happen early June so that it can be before things get crazy with health stuff and surgery stuff. So,
the
looking forward to
Nugents
that.
are good at coming up with names. Like you came up with Armageddon and all that kind of stuff. Like you always come up with great names for whatever you did. The brocation.
yeah. We're wordsmiths. What can we say?
Well, congratulations. Good job.
I got 2 things. Going to Arkansas for a cousin hangout. We haven't thought of a cool
Awesome.
name yet. And then going to Mississippi for the classic
right.
long reunion in the Deep South. Mississippi, the fair. So,
The long
2
one.
extended trips
yes.
instead of 15
Yes, correct.
like last year.
Oh my gosh.
That was so hard to record last year. I remember
I
that.
know.
Like, how in the world do you get these in? Might be a little easier this time, but
Yeah.
at some point we need to compare our schedules and make sure we do.
We just need one long, day. Record a whole bunch of them. Get in
think
the
that would be good
hopper,
quality.
and
Yeah. Kind of like today.
just like today.
So let's get into our next episode, content-wise. We started our series on the Apocrypha last week. We began with the additions to Daniel, and we started with kind of the longest story in the additions to Daniel, which is Susanna, and hope you enjoyed that. And we have this story, which is kind of 2 stories. It's called Bel and the Dragon,
Mm-hmm.
but really there's a story of Bel and there's a story of the dragon.
Right.
Yep.
When I hear the story Bel and the Dragon, I'm imagining these 2 characters,
Correct. Yeah.
Bel and the dragon, that are having these. But really, it's 2 different stories. It's really Daniel and Bel, and then Daniel and the dragon.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll start with the story of Bel and see where this conversation goes. But really, our goal is to wrap up the additions to Daniel today and then move on to something next week. Perhaps Tobit. I think Tobit would be
Tobit's a great story.
great for next week.
I like that story.
We'll see. So, maybe to be clear, to start with, we should say who Bel is.
Yes.
That
might help the reader out.
Yes, Bel and Marduk are synonymous. So they are the chief of the Babylonian pantheon, the chief god, and so that's what. So when we talk about Bel, that's what we're talking about. It's not a person; it's a deity. It's
Yeah.
Marduk. So like Baal, sort of, but not really. All right, so here we go. When King Astyages,
I'm so glad you had to read that.
Astyages,
I thought the exact same thing. Thank you, Sam.
You're
for
welcome.
Establishing
was
that
laid to
pronunciation.
rest with his ancestors, Cyrus the Persian succeeded to his kingdom. Daniel was a companion of the king and was the most honored of all his friends. Now the Babylonians had an idol called Bel, and every day they provided for it 12 bushels of choice flour and 40 sheep and 6 measures of wine. The king revered it and went every day to worship it. But Daniel worshipped his own God. So the king said to him, "Why do you not worship Bel?" He answered, "Because I do not revere idols made with hands, but the living God who created heaven and earth and has dominion over all living creatures." The king said to him, "Do you not think that Bel is the living God? Do you not see how much he eats and drinks every day?" And Daniel laughed and said, "Do not be deceived, O king, for this thing is only clay inside and bronze outside, and it never ate or drank anything." So that sets up the conflict, right?
Yeah.
And this, I mean, if you know the story of Daniel, this kind of fits right in. This
It
is the same
does,
sort of
yeah.
thing that would happen,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You got Cyrus and Babylonians back. You got this back and forth between the Babylonians and the Persians this time period. But it's hilarious that they set it up as this god and that's a lot of food.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot of food.
That's a lot of
Yeah.
food. And this is all in keeping with understanding of Babylonian religion. So if there's a really boring dissertation, if you want to read it, I wrote it about just the idea of feeding and caring for the deities. And so they did. They provided choice, sumptuous food and laid it out before their god, their idol. They also washed and bathed them, but that's a whole other thing. And so this is not unheard of. Like, this is kind of expected. And so and it's just hilarious. Like, don't you see how much he eats? Man, he's a hungry god.
Yeah,
He's a big hungry guy.
This has to be an exaggeration.
Oh, for sure.
I can't imagine a world in which 40 sheep a day.
A day. Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way.
Yeah, it's got to be hyperbole.
And they're okay with that. This is a story that's meant to convey a point, and a little exaggeration along the way is acceptable. And but it's building on a reality. There were these gods that were revered with food, and this is kind of how it went down.
I will say that there were large quantities given to the deity, and then the king and his retinue would eat it. But they assumed the god, in their time and place, it was an offering to the god that the king ate as kind of a stand-in for the god. Does that make sense?
Yeah, most parties were kind of like that.
Yes.
Right. This is a little different.
Well,
You think?
No. Well, yes and no. I think there is some exaggeration on the amount of food, but there's definitely food given, and the king's got to eat, and his people have to eat. So there has to be a decent amount of food that's given each day. So on some level, it basically takes the providing for the god as also providing for the king and his people.
So 40 sheep could fill the whole royal, feed the whole royal entourage.
Right.
Yeah.
But the whole royal entourage might not have been fed by food given to the deity. Does that make sense?
Right.
Definitely the king, definitely his close people, but not 15 layers down. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, one of the things that in the Bible in general, the Bible doesn't give us a ton of information about pagan worship practices.
Right.
We get a lot about Jewish practices and Christian, but it's just very kind of obliquely referred to by the writers. And so this story actually gives us a little bit of insight into the kinds of practices that were common in the ancient world. And it's not just in the intertestamental period, but probably also even into the New Testament period. And so to worship a god in the ancient world was to give that god food and wine.
Mm-hmm.
It's in many ways, it's kind of like, a bribe or sucking up to him. It's like, hey, we'll give you lots of food. We'll keep you well fed. Just lay back, we'll peel the grapes for you or whatever. But do what we want, bless us, give us victory in battle, or give our sheep lots of babies, whatever. You're trying to get that God on your side to bring favorable circumstances to your life. And so one of the things that you do is you provide them with lots of food and drink.
Yeah, it makes me think. This is a little bit different than what we have in food sacrifice to idols in Corinth.
Yeah.
Where there would be public assemblies, there are religious feasts in honor of gods, and a bunch of people have eaten the food. And that's how even a lot of the sacrifices in the Old Testament, they're sacrificed to God and they're shared with the priests and with the people who brought the sacrifice and their family who traveled with them. Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This seems different in that this king thinks that the God actually is the one eating the food.
Yeah.
Right. And
you know what I'm saying? He doesn't
that's key
think
separation. Yes.
he doesn't think that him and his people are eating it, and then he thinks, no, this God has to be real. Look at all the food he's eating.
Right.
So it's a little bit different.
And that's what makes this kind of a parody rather than reality. Right.
Yeah. Well, good. Yeah, because this may not actually be the way it was practiced. This is a parody.
Yes,
of
what they did.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a good clarification.
Well, and it's consistent with the way the Israelites mocked idolatry.
Yes.
Like you see in Isaiah and places like that, where they're mocking people who cut down a tree, turn half of it into a god, and use the rest to cook your food. It's like, that's just so stupid. Do you not see the ridiculousness of your behavior? And so it's that same kind of Israelite condescension towards idolatry.
All right. Let's keep going. It gets better.
All right, continuing on. Then the king was angry and called to the priests of Bel and said to them, "If you do not tell me who is eating these provisions, you shall die. But if you prove that Bel is eating them, Daniel shall die, because he has spoken blasphemy against Bel." King's pretty angry. Daniel said to the king, "Let it be done as you have said."
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's do a test, see who's right, and I'm willing to get on the side of whoever's right.
Yep, let's figure this out. Now there were 70 priests of Bel, besides their wives and children. So the king went with Daniel into the temple of Bel. The priests of Bel said, "See, we are now going outside. You yourself, O king, set the food and prepare the wine, and shut the door and seal it with your signet. When you return in the morning, if you do not find that Bel has eaten it all, we will die. Otherwise, Daniel will, who is telling lies about us." They were unconcerned, for beneath the table they had made a hidden entrance through which they used to go in regularly and consume the provisions. After they had gone out, the king set out all the food for Bel. Then Daniel ordered his servants to bring ashes, and they scattered them throughout the whole temple in the presence of the king alone. Then they went out, shut the door, and sealed it with the king's signet, and departed. During the night, the priests came as usual with their wives and children, and they ate and drank everything.
So good.
Yeah.
The secret trap door into the temple precincts. It's great.
Oh, yeah. I love this part of the story. This is just another one of those deuterocanonical stories I love. Because now, again, it's Daniel's wisdom, but it's such a great trap.
Yeah.
And somehow Daniel knew. Like, he knew something the king didn't know. He's like, I know somebody's sneaking in there. It's just got to be
There's
true.
no way that thing is eating that.
Yeah. And so he's like, the only way I can find out is to scatter ash and look for the footprints in the morning.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Great job, Dan.
And this story is a little bit different because you don't have, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon
Right.
him, or the Lord empowered him to know this. It's kind of like him as a Jew knows that this must be some kind of secret hidden thing.
Yeah.
And I know how to expose it. And it seems like he didn't know where the trapdoor was, or else, when they went in there,
Yeah,
he
he
would have
just-
said,
There it is. Right.
right. But it's like, well, we can at least prove that a ton of people are in here.
Mhm.
And it's so interesting. Like, you'd think there had to be a raucous party at night, but it's like the silent celebration.
Right.
As they're all in there munching on the food. No one else can hear what's going on.
I know, right?
Because these, they don't have fans that they sleep with at night. Like, it's pretty quiet, right, at nighttime. But somehow this priestly party is going on without a sound.
Well, especially like wives and kids. Maybe the adults can be quiet, but how do you keep the kids quiet when they're
Right?
eating the food?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can only conclude that, Persian children were very well behaved.
Sure. Let's go with that.
Yeah, let's go with that one.
Or this is part of the parody.
Yes.
That's
for
better.
sure.
Probably a
So,
better explanation.
a lot like Susanna, like there's a trap,
Mhm.
there's a plot, except instead of the men who are setting the trap for Susanna to walk in, you kind of have, and Daniel, who kind of sets his own trap for the men to walk in, you have Daniel setting the trap because he knows something's going on.
Yep.
So let's see how it ends. Verse 16. Early in the morning, the king rose and came, and Daniel with him. The king said, "Are the seals unbroken, Daniel?" He said, "They are unbroken, O king." As soon as the doors were opened, the king looked at the table and shouted in a loud voice, "You are great, O Bel, and in you there is no deceit at all."
The food's gone.
And that's how the story ends. Just kidding. But Daniel laughed. This is a funny story with lots of laughing.
Yeah.
And restrained the king from going in. "Look at the floor," he said, "and notice whose footprints these are." The king said, "I see the footprints of men and women and children." Then the king was enraged, and he arrested the priests and their wives and children. They showed him the secret doors through which they used to enter to consume what was on the table. Therefore the king put them to death and gave Bel over to Daniel, who destroyed it and its temple. The end
Yes.
of this story.
Of this story. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's so final. And which happens a lot in the book of Daniel.
Right.
Where Daniel comes out on top, like, oh, okay, we'll dismiss with those people, and now Daniel, you're elevated, and
Yeah.
right, it's exactly the same storyline we see over and over in Daniel 1-6.
Well, and going even back, as I said last episode, kind of going back to Joseph, with his wisdom, he gets elevated by both being wise. I guess he doesn't really expose people the way Daniel does. Joseph doesn't do that.
Right.
But his wisdom, people just admire it so much, they just want him in charge.
And I don't know, so it's just fun, right? Where you have these little feet, all these little footprints all around all the food and so forth, and just it's fantastic. And then and also the king is made to look like an idiot, which he's also made to in Daniel at various times too.
Yeah.
Right.
Where it's like, oh, Bel, I knew it. I told you, Daniel. Like, not
Wait,
so fast,
Wait a
fella.
minute.
Yeah, it's like, oh, my bad. Okay, we'll kill them, and
Yeah.
Daniel, you're fine.
But you can totally see this happen. Like, his eyes he wants to know, is the food gone? And
Yeah.
so he's staring at the
Yeah.
table.
Right, yeah.
Like, he's
all he
fixated.
sees.
Like,
Yep.
he comes in, he's on a mission. He wants to see one thing. And, is the door still sealed? All right, we know no one came in.
Yep.
You look at the table, it's empty, and he reaches this premature conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's great storytelling.
Yeah.
And Daniel, again, is laughing. Like, he's just the laughing prophet in this book.
Yes, he is.
Because he knows that now the king has been presumptuous. So
Yeah. It's like, look at that little Nike footprint. Who's got shoes like that? It's like, we only know one person who wears that particular shoe.
Yeah. So I don't want to say much more about that because, the story tells itself.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's humorous, and hopefully you enjoyed it as much as we did. And the reason why Bell and Dragon are linked together is because the next episode kind of builds on this one.
Mm-hmm.
So, Sam, you want to read
Sure.
The Dragon?
I will. The whole thing? No. We'll go as far as that seems appropriate. Now, in that place, there was a great dragon, which the Babylonians revered. The king said to Daniel, "You cannot deny that this is a living God, so worship him." Daniel said, "I worship the Lord my God, for he is the living God. But give me permission, O king, and I will kill the dragon without a sword or club." The king said, "I give you permission." And so again, it sets it up like there's another this dragon thing, which some suggest was perhaps Tiamat, which is another Babylonian deity. Either way, it's another anti-Yahweh religious thing. And of course, the king says, "Okay, you won the last round with Bel, but look at that thing. That's got to be real,
You
right?"
can't deny this is alive.
Yeah,
Because that
Right,
was
yeah.
the big thing he established.
Yeah.
That thing isn't alive. This creature is clearly alive.
Yep.
And, it doesn't establish why they assume that this alive creature was a god,
yeah.
right?
It doesn't
That,
necessarily.
the king could just assume that everyone reveres this as a god. Like all the, Babylonian Persians, they believe this is a god, Daniel. You can't deny that it's alive.
Yeah.
And so what he has to prove here is that, well, it may be alive, but it's not a god.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the test is kind of different. There's some language. I think the Greek word for this dragon, I think, shows up in the Old Testament in the Greek translation. So it's interesting to see where it shows up as we kind of think about who this might be referring to. So the same Greek word, and it is drakon,
Yep.
is used of Leviathan
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
in Job 41, as well as in Isaiah 27. And in Isaiah 27, it's clearly kind of like the beast of the sea, right?
Yeah.
It's also the word used of the ancient dragon in Revelation 12 and 20.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of interesting. The word could be translated serpent,
Yes.
which is helpful kind of understanding.
And there are places in the Old Testament where they're used interchangeably, like Ophis and Drakon are used
Yeah.
interchangeably.
Job 26:13 is an example where drakon is translated serpent. But there is another word that more specifically means serpent, which is, what'd you say, opsis?
Ophis.
Ophis.
Yeah.
So, and that's the word used in Genesis 3.
Right.
And it's interesting in Revelation 12 and 20, it's used along with dragon, like the dragon serpent.
Yep.
Right. And Isaiah 27 uses dragon serpent as well.
Yeah.
So there's at least some context for what this is. Is it a dragon? Or it's interesting. Like, in Leviathan language, it's kind of a water creature.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not really one that you would
Land,
find
yeah.
on land. And I guess they don't specify that this thing stays on land. It doesn't go in the water. But it seems like it's on land for this.
Yeah. Well, I think for most Americans, when they think dragons, they're thinking like House of Dragon, those kinds of like European fire-breathing dragons, from The Hobbit or whatever. But biblical dragons in the ancient Near East were actually more associated with water. They don't
Yeah.
breathe fire. They live in the depths of the ocean. And so, yeah, they're just really different. In fact, the Isis Gate, the great Babylonian Isis Gate, was adorned with different figures of animals like lions and stuff. But there are several dragons that are on it. And it just looks like a snake with legs. Is all
Yeah.
it really looks like. A couple of other Old Testament dragon references are in like Isaiah. I think it's Isaiah where the dragon represents Egypt, and there's another one I think is it Jeremiah where it represents Babylon. And in the Old Greek, they're both referenced. Both those like ancient kingdoms are dragons specifically.
Yeah. Egypt especially is called Rahab a lot.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Rahab.
Yeah. And so, yeah, the dragon imagery of the Old Testament has to be understood in its ancient Near Eastern context rather than thinking about, like I said, the fire-breathing dragons of like Beowulf or, Sigurd or whatever.
But if this could be a snake, I mean, do you think what they think is a dragon is this large, impressive snake?
Could be. Yeah.
Could be an iguana, a big one. Those Komodo dragons.
Well, I think
Yeah,
Komodo
right.
dragon is what I was
Yeah.
thinking of. Could either be like a Komodo dragon, or like you said, it could be like a python or something like that. Just a really large snake. Because I mean, pythons can get to be like over 20 feet long. And so, yeah, I could see it being an actual creature that people have come to revere as some kind of a god.
And they like pamper it and baby it and all these sorts of things.
Bringing it 40 sheep and all
Yeah,
that.
that sort of thing.
Yeah. Exactly.
But again, parody, so it's
Yeah.
hard to know exactly what he had in mind or but
Is he making up something, right? Is for the story you have, in essence, a creature that they revere as a god,
Right.
And they're just using the word dragon to represent it.
Yep.
So the next part of the story, just one verse here that I will read. Daniel said, "All right, I'll kill the dragon, show you it's not anything big. And I'm going to do it without a sword or a club." That's what's really interesting. Excuse me. Then Daniel took pitch, fat, and hair and boiled them together and made cakes, which he fed to the dragon. The dragon ate them and burst open. Then Daniel said, "See what you've been worshiping?" So, oh man, somebody's got to help me with this, because I don't think I know enough about the ancient Near East to know how this particular baking method would have been devastating to a dragon's digestive tract.
I don't know either.
Yeah. I don't know if it just produces copious amounts of gas, like it can't pass gas and
Pitch?
burst
I mean,
open.
is that like tar-ish
Yeah.
Yeah,
type
that's what I was
stuff?
thinking, yeah.
That
Maybe
can't
just-
be good.
Maybe just clogged him up and I don't know.
Oh yeah, you know.
Expand. I don't know. Who knows? But I think that's missing the point, right?
Right, yeah, exactly.
The point is he made these cakes in order to blow up the dragon.
He did. He created dynamite.
Yeah.
Dragon dynamite. But the point, go ahead.
I should say it reminds me a little bit of like Tremors with those worm things. They stuff
gosh.
dynamite in and blow them up. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. Well, and the whole point though is that he is able to prove it's not a god. He's like, if I can kill it, it's not a god. And that's what he says. Look at what you've been worshiping. This animal with
Guts
his,
everywhere.
Yeah, stomach blown open. It's like, you've been worshiping this, and it goes back to what I said just a few minutes ago about the Israelites mocking idolatry. Well, here you actually don't have an idol. You've got a living creature that's been worshipped. But he's like, why would you worship this? It's not anything worthy of your veneration.
Yeah. And this isn't really what the whole story is about. Like, this is setting up the rest of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so it's really the response of how the Babylonian community responded to this triumph of Daniel. So I'll read 28 to 30. When the Babylonians heard about it, they were very indignant and conspired against the king, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Right? Saying, "The king has become a Jew. He has destroyed Bel and killed the dragon and slaughtered the priests." Going to the king, they said, "Hand Daniel over to us, or else we will kill you and your household." The king saw that they were pressing him hard, and under compulsion, he handed Daniel over to them.
Yeah, that is fascinating that they seem to wield so much power.
I was thinking the
and
same
sway.
thing,
Like,
yeah.
I'm the king. Who do you think you are? I'll kill you too. But that's again part of the story.
Right.
The tension of the story.
But I mean, the impotence of the king, that he could be so swayed by the people. It's like, call out your army. Don't you have command over thousands of troops
Right.
here? But clearly, he sees this as a legitimate threat. Now, again, you're right. It's probably not an accurate representation of ancient kingdoms, but there's enough there that make people go, "This is a compelling story."
Yeah, and I think it does point to a kind of reality. We assume, especially in America, that any country that has a king, they have this tyrant over them, and the people have no say, and the people have no voice, and the people have no influence.
Yeah.
Right? But that's not true. Countries with kings have people who have great influence. And if the king doesn't keep the people happy, they kill the king.
Right.
And they appoint someone else that will do what they want.
Yeah.
And so there's this tension of being a king. They give you greater, power than, most rulers happen in, democratic societies, right? But still, that power is conditional.
Yeah.
And if the people are not happy, they'll just kill you. They won't vote you out of office. You get killed. And so their position's a little more precarious.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you have so many. I mean, the story of kings and kingdoms is there's so many assassinations. Because keeping the people happy really matters. And so the people actually do have a genuine voice
Mhm.
that impacts legislation and policy. And I think this is maybe part of the Jewish critique. You think kingship is the solution, or like this all-powerful kings. Like kings are kind of outed here as being beholden to the people.
Yeah.
And I think there's a little Jewish critique of monarchy.
Yeah. I think also it shows a relationship of religion and politics in the ancient world. In America, it's like this idea of separation of church and state, which is really foreign. In the ancient world, the king was upheld by religion. Religion played a role in keeping him in power, sort of justifying his throne. At the same time, the king was responsible for upholding their religious practices. And remember, religion was not like Christianity or Judaism. Religion didn't teach you how to live. That was more the philosophical schools that taught you the do this, don't do that kind of stuff. But religion was for promoting a flourishing society and sort of keeping things operating. You just want year after year to get many crops and victory over enemies and all that kind of stuff. And probably the people are afraid that if the king turns away from their gods, we're not going to grow food, we're going to lose to our enemies, like all these horrible things are going to happen. And so the king is a shepherd. You're supposed to shepherd us, and I don't think you're doing a very good job. And so you better get things right, or we'll find somebody else who can do a better job than you can.
So, so it all falls on Daniel anyway.
That's right.
Yep.
So, speaking of verse 31, they threw Daniel into the lion's den, and he was there for 6 days. There were 7 lions in the den, and every day they had been given 2 human bodies and 2 sheep. But now they were given nothing, so they would devour Daniel. So this may sound familiar to a previous Daniel story, Daniel and the lion's den, of course. And so it's the same sort of idea where, of course, I think the writer's picking up on that story as well, and saying, it happened to him again. Ideally, ideally for them, that he would be eaten because they're starving, because they're even holding back food, so they have to eat Daniel. They got nothing else to eat. Does he die, Ron?
Let's find out. Let's keep reading. Now the prophet Habakkuk was in Judea. Habakkuk or Habakkuk?
Habakkuk.
Thank you.
Hambakum.
There we go. He had made a stew and had broken bread into a bowl and was going into the field to take it to the reapers. But the angel of the Lord said to Habakkuk, "Take the food that you have to Babylon, to Daniel in the lion's den." Habakkuk said, "Sir, I have never seen Babylon, and I know nothing about the den." Then the angel of the Lord took him by the crown of his head and carried him by his hair with a gust of the wind. He set him down in Babylon, right over the den. Then Habakkuk shouted, "Daniel, Daniel, take the food that God has sent you." Daniel said, "You have remembered me, O God, and have not abandoned me not abandoned those who love you." So Daniel got up and ate, and the angel of God immediately returned Habakkuk to his own place.
This is such a weird interlude, right?
It is.
It's going along fine, and all of a sudden, let's bring Habakkuk, who wasn't around during this time period, and have him do some stuff for Daniel.
And he gets carried by his hair.
Yeah,
I want to see
hilarious.
that. Like this angel grabbing him by the hair. It's like, all right, I'll take you there. I see Habakkuk like, oh God, to the front. Like getting carried by the
I'm
hair.
just making some stew here. Leave me alone, God.
I was trying to have some dinner. I was trying to feed the people working in the field here.
Yeah, I wondered how, like, in the Greek Bibles that have both stories, like this is obviously like a different way of telling the Daniel and the lion's den story in terms of like what happens in the den. It's like they're giving details that the Hebrew version of the story don't give.
Right. Like the number of lions and what they ate, and then this Habakkuk business.
Yeah, how he was nourished in that time. Like God looked after him in a special way, and in the Hebrew version, he looks in and sees an angel, or no, that's what Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael.
Yeah.
So I've kind of conflating those, but nonetheless, the point is the same. But you have this weird transporting by the hair thing.
Yes.
Which is not entirely unlike some visions that prophets have in the Old Testament.
Yep.
You look at this, and because it's in the Apocrypha, you can say, how ridiculous. No wonder it didn't end up in the Bible. But if something like that happened in the Bible, you'd be saying, yeah, with God, all things are possible.
Right, yeah. Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So I try not to be too critical of the stories on this account.
I mean, Ezekiel got transported different places from Babylon to Jerusalem. So, I mean, like, it doesn't say by the hair or anything, but the same idea seems to be.
Yeah.
Well, and Philip in the book of Acts kind of gets
Exactly.
transported.
Yeah.
little Star Trek action there.
Yeah. So there are biblical stories where similar things are happening.
Mm-hmm.
This time it's just funny because it's by the hair, and he's like, "Wait, what are you doing? I don't want to go.
Oh,
Just trying to enjoy a meal here."
exactly.
And then he's immediately returned. So, all right. Well, that's not the ending.
That is not. A little bit more
That'd
to
be
go.
a weird ending.
3 more verses. On the 7th day, the king came to mourn for Daniel. I love that. He came to mourn, just assuming what had happened.
Yeah.
When he came to the den, he looked in, and there sat Daniel. The king shouted with a loud voice, "You are great, O Lord, the God of Daniel, and there is no other besides you." Then he pulled out Daniel out and threw into the den those who had attempted his destruction, and they were instantly eaten before his eyes. The end.
And so God protects Daniel, which we obviously saw in the biblical Daniel story. But it's that same idea of God protecting his people, protecting the righteous, and bringing judgment upon the wicked. And so it's a story that ends in a very similar way. We see the triumph of God and his people, those who revere God. And I do like the judgment too.
Yeah. For me, the takeaway is kind of what you're saying earlier, John, where in the narrator in Susanna sort of lays out how pious and devoted she is. The narrator doesn't do that here, but in the words of Daniel, he says, I believe in the living God, you're an idiot, right? And so that sort of brings that out through his statements, and it shows that, and the king's response is a lot like what we see with like Nebuchadnezzar in the actual book of Daniel, how he comes back and says, "Oh, you do serve a pretty amazing God. It's pretty awesome." Right? And we're not talking about full conversion or anything, but there's the acknowledgement that the God of the Jews is superior to their own deities, and shown in his providence for, in this case, Daniel.
Yeah, Bell and the Dragon.
Bell and the Dragon. I first was introduced to Bell and Dragon in high school when I was courting a young lady who was a Catholic, and she's like,
"Really?
Look at." I'm like, "Oh man, these stories are great." Anyway, that's it. Had never heard of it before then, but
Yeah,
I remember when I was in high school, I remember being at a hospital for some reason. I don't even know why. And I was looking for just some place to hang out. So I sat down in the chapel, and I found a Catholic Bible. And that was my first exposure to the Deuterocanonical books. And I remember paging through it going, these are kind of interesting, but I never saw them again for like another 20 years.
I don't know if I read them until seminary when I took an intertestamental literature course.
Yeah.
That may have been my first time. Yeah, and I was raised Catholic, so go figure.
Go figure.
Well, there are actually 2 more additions to Daniel. They're not story-like. These others are standalone stories that could be their own chapters.
Yeah.
Right? But these other additions are actually inserted into the story of what we would say the fiery furnace story,
right,
with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And then, so they're inserted in what would be the biblical version of Daniel between 323 and 324. And so the first one is called the Prayer of Azariah, and the other one is the Song of the Three Jews. And so the prayer is a prayer he prays, like they're in the furnace, and therefore they're in danger, but he reaches out to God in prayer. Right? And then the Song of the Three Jews is kind of after God delivers them, they have this praise. So it's kind of part of that chapter.
Yeah.
Not a chapter in and of itself.
Right. Expanded. Right. If you were to say, if you were in a fire furnace, what would you say? And this would be the prayer I would pray. Well, maybe not. That's what's kind of interesting.
Or if you ever find yourself in a fiery furnace,
obviously
here's a prayer that you can pray.
So they're expanding things that are already in the Daniel story.
Right. Yeah.
So just want to do a quick read through of it. There's the prayer will kind of speak for itself. We can make a couple observations.
Sure. Do you want to go all the way to the prayer?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
I believe in you.
They walked around in the midst of the flames, singing hymns to God and blessing the Lord, which I love that. Then Azariah, which, just a reminder, Azariah is one of the names of the 3 guys. It's their Hebrew name. Did you say that already?
Right. Yeah, their Hebrew names are Azariah,
Mishael.
Hananiah, and Mishael.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's who we're talking about here. Blessed are you, O Lord, God of our ancestors, worthy of praise, and glorious is your name forever. For you are just in all you have done. All your works are true, and your ways right, and all your judgments are true. You've executed true judgments in all you have brought upon us, and upon Jerusalem, the holy city of our ancestors. By a true judgment you have brought all this upon us because of our sins. For we have sinned and broken your law in turning away from you. In all matters we have sinned grievously. We have not obeyed your commandments. We have not kept them or done what you have commanded us for our own good. So you have brought upon us So all that you've brought upon us and all that you've done to us, you've done by a true judgment. You've handed us over to our enemies, lawless and hateful rebels, and to an unjust king, the most wicked in all the world. And now we cannot open our mouths. We are your servants who worship you, have become a shame and a reproach. For your name's sake, do not give us up forever. Do not annul your covenant. Do not withdraw your mercy from us for the sake of Abraham, your beloved, and for the sake of your servant Isaac and Israel, your holy one, to whom you promised to multiply their descendants like the stars of heaven and the sand on the shores of the sea. For we, O Lord, have become fewer than any other nation. We are brought low this day in all the world because of our sin. In our day, we have no ruler or prophet or leader, no burnt offering, no sacrifice, no oblation, no incense, no place to make an offering before you to find mercy. Yet with a contrite heart and a humble spirit may we be accepted, as though it were with burnt offerings of rams and bulls, or with tens of thousands of fat lambs. Such may our sacrifice be in your sight today, and may we unreservedly follow you. For no shame will come to those who trust in you. And now with all our heart we follow you. We fear you and seek your presence. Do not put us to shame, but deal with us in your patience and in your abundant mercy. Deliver us in accordance with your marvelous works and bring glory to your name, O Lord. Let all who do harm to your servants be put to shame. Let them be disgraced and deprived of all power, and let their strengths be broken. Let them know that you alone are the Lord God, glorious over the whole world.
Yeah. What an odd prayer to pray in the furnace. I'd be like, God, we did nothing wrong. Please save us.
We're innocent. What's going on? We did exactly what you told us to do, and here we find ourselves.
Yeah. But instead, what we find is a penitential prayer acknowledging the sins of Israel that led them into exile and asking God to be with his exilic people with favor and deliver them and save them as they tried to be faithful to him in exile.
Yeah, that's what strikes me, because you're right. You go, we're just trying to honor God and we're in the fiery furnace. But it's like the only reason we're in the fiery furnace is because we made bad decisions that led to our exile. And even though we're trying to honor God, we're doing it in the face of people who do not worship that same God. And this is how they treat us. It's kind of a Cain and Abel story, the righteous suffering at the hands of the wicked. And so it's very similar to, I think it's Daniel 8, where Daniel prays his prayer of repentance. Again, acknowledging our sin. God, we're here because we sinned against you. So, yeah, it's a great prayer.
Yeah, and it seemed like this prayer had a different life before it ended up in the book of Daniel. Like, it just seems like this is a good prayer that the Israelites in exile would pray to God. To ask him to look upon them in favor in their time of exile.
I mean, this could easily have been a lament psalm, right? Like, taken out of this context, it could fit a lot of contexts. They're being persecuted in lots of different ways. And so, it definitely seems like it was written and maybe slightly adapted to say, oh, yeah, of course, it's the three guys in the thing. But it just it's not that. There's more going on.
Once you get the preface out of the way, it could be just something they do in a Jewish gathering.
Right. Yeah, without a doubt.
So the last part is the Song of the Three Jews. And this one seems a little more situation specific. We're kind of running a little short on time. You want to start us, Ron?
Happy to do so. I'll put my glasses on, though.
Of course.
Now the king's servants who threw them in kept stoking the fire with naphtha, pitch, tinder, and brushwood. And the flames poured out above the furnace, 49 cubits. Woo, that's hot. And spread out and burned those Chaldeans who were caught near the furnace. But the angel of the Lord came down into the furnace to be with Azariah and his companions, and drove the fiery flame out of the furnace, and made the inside of the furnace as though a moist wind were whistling through it. And the fire did not touch them at all, and caused them no pain or distress. And so the deliverance of these guys, to which they respond, then the three with one voice praised and glorified and blessed God in the furnace. Blessed are you, O Lord, the God of our ancestors, and to be praised and highly exalted forever. And blessed is your glorious holy name, and to be praised and highly exalted forever. Blessed are you in the temple of your holy glory, to be extolled and highly glorified forever. Blessed are you who look into the depths from your throne on the cherubim, and to be praised and highly exalted forever. Blessed are you on the throne of your kingdom, to be extolled and highly exalted forever. Blessed are you in the firmament of heaven, to be sung and glorified forever. A little repetition there.
Yeah, and so there is a structure. I don't think we'll read the whole thing, but there's a structure here. It's just a hymn of praise.
Yeah.
And again, it seems like a hymn of praise that could be sung in multiple contexts. But what it does is you have this, widest kind of scope of vision. Like, blessed be God, first like in his high places, in all the wonderful places where he dwells that humans don't even have access to. And then there's going to be this transition in verse 34 where, they are just blessing God. And now it's a transition to invite others to join them in blessing God. So in 34 through 68, the three Jews call upon God's works and God's people to bless God. And so like in 34, bless the Lord, all you works of the Lord. Sing praise to him and highly exalt him forever. Bless the Lord, you heavens. And then in verse 36, bless the Lord, you angels of the Lord. In 37, bless the Lord, all you waters above the heavens. And in 38, bless you, the powers of the Lord. And then 39, the sun and moon. And each of these verses ends with the refrain, sing praise to him and highly exalt him forever. So it's this cultic kind of formula for of kind of hymn with a set pattern that repeats itself over and over again. It starts with these heavenly elements, right? And then it kind of switches in verse 41 to talk about atmospheric elements. Like the heavenly elements are like angels and like stuff in the God realm that humans can't get to. But the next section, 41 and following, talks about the rain and the dew and the winds and the fire and the heat and the snow and the days and the nights and the light and the darkness, the ice, the cold, like things in the earthly realm are also invited to bless the Lord. And then you get to another transition in verse 51. Let the earth bless the Lord. So we went from the highest heavens to like the lower heavens, and now the earth is invited to bless the Lord, mountains and hills, all that grows, seas and rivers, springs, everything that swims in the waters,
Whales.
Birds of the air. Yeah, it does say monsters, monsters of the water, all the wild animals and cattle. So, so it's down to kind of earthly, non-human elements. And then in verse 59, it transitions to people on earth. Bless the Lord, all people on earth. Sing praise to him and highly exalt him. And then it goes to bless the Lord, Israel. Bless the Lord, priests. bless the Lord, servants, spirits and souls of the righteous, all who are holy and humble. Praise him. And then it kind of wraps up and applies it to their specific context. So you want to read the last three verses,
Sure.
Sam?
Bless the Lord, Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael. Sing praise to him and highly exalt him forever. For he has rescued us from Hades and saved us from the power of death and delivered us from the midst of the burning fiery furnace. From the midst of the fire he has delivered us. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, and his mercy endures forever. All who worship the Lord, bless the God of gods. Sing praise to him and give thanks to him, for his mercy endures forever. And that refrain, for me, reinforces, like, it sounds a lot like Psalm 136, right? There's this thing, and there's a very cult, like you said, a cultic almost response, like, for the chesed of the Lord endures forever. And so that hasn't been said up until now, but there's been this different refrains for each section, right? Sung, glorified forever, highly exalt him forever, and then finally, his mercy endures forever. So it's clearly it's shaped in such a way that seems to want to be used in a group setting.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's almost, I would think that it's a very customizable song.
Sure.
Like those last three verses, like we started with the highest heavens, and then we came down a little closer to the atmosphere, then we came down to like the earthly realm, and then all creatures, and then all people, and then Israelites, and then the faithful Israelites, and now us in our humble situation. And you could like take that last section and now us, take out, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and insert Christians who are suffering under the persecution of Nero, or
whatever.
It could be appropriated. The same hymn could be appropriated and applied to different circumstances. You just swap out that last section,
right?
And the praise that we offer God is part of this wider praise, spanning from our little situation, our concrete life and world, to the whole earth, giving glory and honor to God. And we're just one small part of this wider chorus of praise.
Yep.
Which is just a really cool song.
Yeah,
Agree.
Yep.
Agree.
For sure. Well,
I have nothing else to add.
Yeah. Did you run into anything? We finished these editions of Daniel that you're like, man, it's a good thing that's not in the Protestant Bible.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Because, or else we'd all be worshiping Mary.
no, to that
No,
question.
I was thinking about that the last episode. I'm like, there's nothing here that bothers me. This is like great stuff. It's like if this was in the Protestant Bible, no complaints. This is good. This is worshiping God and showing how God takes care of his people. Love it.
To be honest, this reminds me of modern sort of historical fiction in that I've read different things where they take a biblical story and they expand it and they add in more flavor and color and characters. And like that's what is going on here. It's adding a little bit more into the story, but it's got the same point, right? Is to remind you of who's the ultimate supreme God and who's not. And so like, yeah, and there's nothing in there that's like, oh boy, that is so heretical. Like,
Right.
Which part of God being the living God's heretical?
Yeah.
And yes, it may not have happened exactly like that. They don't care. They made the three guys may not actually said those words, more than likely not. But that's not the point, right? It's to use this setting to get a different sort of purpose across.
And to inspire and encourage exilic people to maintain their covenant faithfulness to God, not just in word, but in action.
Yeah. And we did talk a little bit before the show about when you add these sections, especially Susanna, like it changes the book of Daniel.
A little bit,
yeah.
Like Daniel, as a 2-part book with the apocalyptic section that follows the stories. And there's just strong parallels between the figures and kings in the first part and then events that are happening in the second part. Like the Hebrew version is very tight.
It is, I agree.
And it seems like it has been organized in a very careful and deliberate way.
Yeah.
And when you add all this in, it kind of throws that off.
Yeah.
I agree.
And so I'm glad it's kept separate as a book of editions.
Mm-hmm.
Like let's treat Daniel, 1 through 12 on its own terms.
Right.
Because there's a lot going on there and it's so tightly written that you don't want to throw off the symmetry of the book.
Yeah.
But at the same time, these stories do add cool flavor. If you were just going to talk about, if you're going to, extract the fiery furnace scene from the whole book of Daniel and just look on it, if you were to add this prayer and this praise, it wouldn't hurt that as a standalone story.
Right.
It would enrich it, I would think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Well, it's our first foray into the Apocrypha. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If not, you're welcome to give feedback. It may or may not change things.
So we are going to do the Book of Tobit next week.
Probably.
Maybe
Sure.
we'll forecast that just to tell people. If you want to read it in advance, you can probably just search for
Online,
Tobit
sure.
online and you'll probably get a kind of
Oldie.
an old, like King James
Ye old.
version of Tobit, unless you can find the NRSV in something like a Bible Gateway.
Yeah.
A lot of NRSV translations have these editions in them.
Yep.
But read Tobit if you want to be prepared. If not, I don't think we won't read the whole book.
No.
I think that's why I'm saying this. We're going to tell the story and maybe do excerpts because it's too long to work through in the way that these editions. Or were we going to do the editions to Esther first?
Yeah, we were, I think.
Retract that whole thing.
Oh,
We're not doing Tobit yet. Next time we're going to do the additions to Esther, and then after that,
Then
Tobit.
we'll do Tobit.
sure.
So until then,
Thanks for joining us in this episode of the After Class Podcast. After Class because
The best conversations happen.
after class.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the After Class Podcast. ACP is hosted by Sam Long, John Nugent, and Ron Peters. Audio production is provided by Drew Nyquist. Social media is managed by Darren Harris.